Well, welcome back to part two of It's a Woman's World. And as you know, I'm not having this conversation alone. Welcome, Nadia Jordana. Welcome back to part two.
I can't wait to hear what new things we're going to learn on the subject of the rainforests today.
Absolutely. And Barbara, welcome back to part two.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Barbara Lavalure, and I always enjoy these conversations, and particularly making them available to the women who and men who watch our programs on YouTube. So it's just an honor to be in conversation with all of you, powerful women, and asking questions of Laura. Thank you so much.
Yes. And of course, Candy Pettiford. Welcome back.
Well, I am excited because the first part was so juicy, so good. I'm telling everybody else, please stay for the second part. It's going to be even more juicier.
Yes, it is. And of course, we have Laura who is here talking about her books, all of her many travels, and all of the things that she has done. And I am Jamila Pettiford, your host. Laura, let's get back into this. Let's get back to this great conversation. And that's what we're here to do today, to inspire you to do the same. Let's continue this conversation. Now, we know that you wrote this book, that you have been there. We kind of went through all of those great things. There is a social aspect to your book, the removal of the rainforest and the consistent tearing down of the rainforest. Can you talk about and maybe talk to some of the things that you, with the people, have shared with you? What does it feel like to have their homeland tore down?
Yeah, so my co-author Patricia Walinga, told me how it felt. The sacred beings that I had mentioned before, called the Amasanga, who are kind of protectors of the rainforest, that when the rainforest was invaded by the oil company, people said they could hear these sacred beings screaming and wailing. So it was very, very emotional for them. So my co-author Patricia, she was actually a young woman who had gone to school she had gone to high school outside of the rainforest because her schooling system within the rainforest only went up to, I think, about sixth grade. So she left, learned, to be proficient in Spanish, and got graduated from high school. She got a job with communications on the radio, telling Quechua, her indigenous community, stories on the radio. But then she was called back to her community because men had actually come in helicopters. They were armed men. They came in, they invaded in helicopters. The community had no prior knowledge, no prior consent, no prior consultation, but it was an invasion, an armed invasion, and they started planting dynamite all around their sacred forest home. So it was devastating. It was a violent entry. They, at first, were put in a powerless position. They felt, especially, that the girls and women were not safe with these invading men coming in. And so it was terrifying. And then also, this home is sacred to them, and they have a very, very intimate relationship with the plants and animals and this whole ecosystem. So to see this being destroyed by seismic oil exploration just was absolutely devastating. So yeah, it was really, really a hard time for them when that happened.
I really appreciated that you used a real people, a real village, a real story in your book.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because the whole community has kind of become activists in protecting their home and joining together with other indigenous groups. And a really cool thing about this movement is it's really multi-generational. So when they went to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in Costa Rica to argue their case, they had, one of the women had a little baby, a newborn baby with her. So children participate in this, teenagers participate. Patricia is about my age. Her parents were also activists, and I'm thinking in their 80s, 90s, just, very wise. Her father was a shaman, called a yachak, and he had a leadership role as well. Her mom, was extremely active. So I like that it's very multi-generational. And I think another really special thing is that women have really been at the forefront of this. So Patricia, she has had a leadership role at a group called Mujeres Amazónicas, which is basically Amazonian women. So it's women from all different indigenous groups bonding together to protect their sacred homes, their sacred forest.
I can't help but compare what you're talking about with the stories that my Native American friends tell me about what happened to them when white people came and started invading and taking what was rightly theirs. I'm very moved by the similarities and the devastation of that. In talking, well, a different question, but I have another question. As the Spanish that you learned in Mexico, did that get you through to all the different countries that you've been in Central and South America? Because I know that, my daughter lived in Barcelona and she was in Mexico, and it's not the same Spanish.
Right. Now that's a great question. I first, I became fluent in Oaxaca, Mexico. So that was kind of my baseline. But as an ESL teacher, English as a second language, over the years, I've had students from all different Latin American countries. And formed friendships with some of my closest friends are former students that I since kind of have continued to have friendships with even after they left the class. And so, so these are Central America, people from Central America, people from South America. And so I've kind of gotten used to speaking all kinds of different Spanish. I was pretty familiar with Ecuadorian Spanish because I collaborated with actually a student who was at the same school where I taught ESL to immigrants here in Colorado. And this is her on the cover. I met her, and she is also an indigenous Quechua Ecuadorian woman from the Andes Mountains. And she asked me to help her tell her story. So we collaborated on this book. It's an amazing story about her girlhood and how she resisted different kinds of oppression growing up. Really triumphant, inspiring story. But so I went, she's one of my closest friends now. We talk a lot. And then also I went to Ecuador a number of times to research her story and to, get to know all the different places and the different people that come into her story. And so I became very comfortable with Ecuadorian Spanish, during those interactions as well. So it didn't feel like too big of a stretch for me to venture into Ecuadorian Spanish in the Amazon.
Well, just to complete my trifecta of questions, can you touch a little bit more or expand a little bit more on the threats to the Amazon? I mean, I know that you talked about the companies coming in, but there's more there. Could you just touch a little bit or expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main threats at this point in Ecuador are oil exploration and drilling, really big threat. Mining operations, so mining for precious minerals like gold, but also minerals like potassium, stuff like that. And, of course, we hear about Brazil cutting down the rainforest for ranch lands, cattle lands. So those are some of the really big threats at this point. And these are international companies coming in. So Patty's community, the company that invaded their land was from Argentina. The community that I stayed with, that was Guarani, it was a Chinese oil company, but they're also facing threats from like Texaco, Chevron, so American companies. So yeah, it's really, really threats from global companies. And the tricky thing is that there's, I think, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 different countries that make up the Amazon. Brazil is the main big one at 60%, but a lot of the countries have kind of unstable political situations. And so you might have leaders who are making decisions that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the environment or indigenous people's lives. And so I think that's been a challenge, is negotiating the unstable politics in these different countries with these big economic forces putting pressure on the government. So the government, like Ecuador is the one that I am most familiar with, but so they do have a history of allowing these companies to come in, selling them the mineral rights, the drilling rights without consultation and consent. So that's been really, really hard for the people who are living on the land and protecting the land.
Yeah.
So now when, let's say this community is displaced, does this, like, let's say your people, would they take them in and say, well, you've been displaced from your people now, we will take you in, and your tribe or whatever however they say it, will be with our tribe, and you can live here because you're now displaced. Your place is tore up. They come in and dug up. What happens there?
Yeah, I love that. I love that concept. And as far as I know, so the place where I visited, the community that I spent time with, was a different indigenous group, the Waorani, and Patty's group is Quechua. So they do have some different kind of cultural traditions and ways of living. I don't know. That's a really interesting idea. Like, I don't know if they have taken in displaced people from other
What do you
groups.
do? I mean, they're displaced.
Yeah,
where do they go?
yeah, well, here's the sad thing is I did do some like investigating with kind of mutual friends to try and figure out what happened to the friends that I made in the Waorani community where I stayed, because I really wanted to get in touch with them and try and figure out, like, how can I help? Is there any chance we could still collaborate? But it's really sad they ended up moving to the nearby town, like a tiny city, like the nearby town. Which, interestingly, this is sad, but the town is named Shell after the oil company. Like, that's the name of the town, is Shell. So they ended up moving to Shell and then trying to find work there. And one of the saddest, most heartbreaking things for me was that my guide, who I felt like I got to know pretty well, his name is Pegonka, in his early 20s. He had been so hopeful about this eco lodge and about writing some books. He was just really kind of bursting with like good plans and good energy. And unfortunately, he ultimately had no choice but to work for the oil company. In the end, that was the only job that he could find, was like working for the enemy. And I know that must have broken his heart to do, but he didn't have other job options and he needed money. So I think that's a really sad situation that some people are put in. Not only do they have the horror of being displaced, but then they have such limited options that they might have to work for the very company that displaced them.
Well, even as on that same subject, farmers who live on the edges of the rainforest, they have to feed their families. They know they're destroying the rainforest by clearing a little extra land, but what do? They need to grow, they need to feed their animals, they need to feed their families, and they're literally, some don't care or don't know, but I'm sure anyone with the least little bit of education with it feels bad if they have to do that in order to take care of their families.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a hard dilemma to be in.
And as a person that's coming in, Laura, to be a part of the culture and to learn from the culture, how do you escape kind of this colonizer mindset of coming in, taking stories, making money off of stories, kind of in a more of a literal cognitive way. It could be a form of colonization, coming in and taking stories and then leaving with the stories. How do you keep the resources and bless the people for the ways that they have blessed you with the stories that you've been able now to benefit from?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jamila. I think when I kind of go into a community as an outsider, I try and have a sense of humility and a sense of like I'm learning and I'm wanting to form connections and I'm wanting to have human connections and have kind of an understanding of, what is your life like? And here's what my life is like. And so I think that creating real human bonds there is really, really important. I really like doing collaborative projects. So I like as much as possible to find ways to kind of amplify voices like Patricia's in this case. I noticed that she had a great platform for talking to important world leaders, to talking to other Indigenous groups, but I felt like she didn't know about the children's book industry, right? And I happen to have a lot of experience with that. And so like approaching it with what do I have to offer that can help kind of uplift her voice and her mission. And so, I think my ability to understand, like to navigate the children's book industry, I think was something that I could offer her. And so, I think also, with Maria Virginia, my co-author for this one, kind of a similar thing. She wanted her book to be in English because she wanted it to reach a lot of people. And so I could help her structure the story. I could help her shape her story in a way that would be like really a page turner. And I could also, translate it to English. And so it has a much more it has a much bigger audience, a much more international audience than it would have had if she had only been able to get it out there in Spanish. So I think just finding, like, going into a place with humility, thinking what can I learn from people? What can I offer people? How can I uplift their voices? And I think the foundation of it all is, the human connections and the real deep friendships and relationships that are formed.
That's good. Yeah, because I think it's very important as we go into Indigenous places and we are connecting with them and understanding their stories, that we are not colonizers of their story, and taking their stuff and then running and getting paid for it and doing different various things with it. And so that's what's so good about being able to collaborate with the people, bringing your wealth of knowledge, and them giving you that, permission to be able to travel with their sacred stories. We also know that it leaves a heritage, and hopefully the legend and the longevity of their stories will live on because you have been so careful to collaborate and treat it with such kindness. So that's good.
Yeah, I hope so. And, I think this is also kind of a movement and an awareness that nonprofit organizations are having that work in this area. Instead of the organizations coming in and saying, okay, this is how we're going to protect the rainforest. This is what we're going to do. The organizations that I kind of follow and donate to have the attitude of, look, the Indigenous communities are the ones who know what's best for the rainforest. So how can we let them be the leader? So kind of the term would be Indigenous led solutions to climate change. And so how can we uplift Indigenous people to take leadership roles, to make important decisions and to be spokespeople for what's going on in the rainforest? And I think that's so, so important. And I hope to kind of contribute to that kind of basic philosophy of, like, how do we help Indigenous-led movements? How do we help them advance their human rights?
That's
Well, if
beautiful.
we have time, a little nugget about Queen as Waters. Is that was I seeing that, Laura?
Yes.
Queen as Waters,
Mhm.
as water. Well, give me a little nugget. Give us a little nugget because that's very interesting. Queen as water?
Yeah, so it's called The Queen of Water. And
Of
so,
water.
yeah, it's the story of the true story of Maria Virginia's childhood growing up in a Quichua community in the Andes. She was taken from her family at age 7
Wow.
by a non-indigenous family. So the term is mestizo, which would be more kind of a
Mestizo.
mixed, and they have higher, higher social privileges, higher social class, I guess you could say, in Ecuador. But anyway, she was taken at age 7, and she was forced to work as a housekeeper and babysitter for free. And she was told that her parents didn't want her anymore, that they had given her away. And so from ages 7 to 15, she worked for this family. It was a very exploitative, abusive situation. And finally, at age 15, she got the courage and the motivation to escape. And then she had to build a whole new life for herself. She had to reconnect with her indigenous roots. And she ended up kind of becoming kind of a star in these, they're kind of like cultural beauty pageants. And that's where the name the Queen of Water comes from, is she was crowned the Queen of Water. And so
Sounds
she,
like a movie. Sounds like a movie, Laura.
I wish, if you know any Hollywood producers, we would love to connect. It is, it's very like heart swelling kind of book. And now, and she used partly with the royalties and the advance from our book, which has done really well. She's gotten 2 master's degrees in psychology, so focusing on children and adolescents. So now many indigenous girls went through what she went through, and it continues to be abuse and exploitation. But so now she's working with children and teenagers who have gone through similar kinds of traumas that she has. And so it's really cool how it's gone full circle, and I'm super proud of her.
Oh, thank you for that. Oh, wow.
And speaking of your books, tell us, where can we find them? When say, for instance, the young people want to know about Standing as Tall as the Trees, The Queen of Water, or your other 8 books that you have available, where would they find them?
Yes, do you have a web address?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. So yeah, kind of a central kind of place to go would be my website, which is www.lauraresau, LAURARESAU.com. And I have, links for where people can find the books. And then I always like to encourage people to use their public library. That's where I have all these special memories at the early stages of my writing journey. And if the book's not there that you want, you can ask your librarian to order it. So that's right. Yeah. So not all my books have to do with the rainforest. I do have a book called Tree of Dreams, which is more for ages maybe 10 to 14. And that is set partly in the rainforest, and does deal with some of these same issues. And then I have a number of books set in different countries, including in Europe. I lived in France for a time and speak French. And so I try to, for me, I feel kind of most alive and engaged when I'm traveling. And so it's kind of natural, I think, for me that a lot of my kind of creative flow comes from my travels. So so the settings would be the United States, Ecuador, Guatemala, Oaxaca, Mexico, and France. And then Verge is my first sci-fi book, and I'm really excited about that. So it is coming out next spring, 2024. And that was a really fun learning experience for me, like how to do world building in a future imagined society. It was really fun. I always like to kind of stretch and grow and try new things.
I have to.
Well, as you know, it is our duty to bring you not only to the things that are happening here, but all around the world, because we want you to stand as tall as the trees. And thank you for taking us on this journey through the rainforest and all of the different ways that the world matters. Well, It is truly a woman's world. And we look forward to seeing you, part 1, part 2 of this great conversation. Come back again. We'll see you next time.
Wonderful. That's a wrap.
Wonderful, excellent.
It'll all come together. We got
Yes, it
plenty-
will. It'll be beautiful. You always do a good job.
It'll be beautiful.
Oh, that's gonna be
And
great.
thank you, Laura.
Thank
Resau.
you. I mean, Jamila, you blow me away. You are an incredible host. I just am so
Incredible.
impressed with your energy and thinking like on your toes and making the whole thing sound like poetry. It's really phenomenal. So thank you.
Well, Laura, you're gonna see more of her, let me tell you.
I know
let's,
I will.
let's bring that up now for just a moment. It was last month. When did I talk to you?
I think it was the 26th or 27th of
Oh,
May.
okay.
Yeah.
But who's checking the dates?
Right. They're going by so fast.
Oh, Jamila is the best there is in my estimation, and she's going to
mine
be
too.
going forward our regular host.
Yes.
And I'm going to be the director, producer, guiding us through these things as time goes by. We got to go with when the best is sitting there in front of us. We got to go with it.
But you know what? I wouldn't be able to do it. First of all, my mom, who is Candy, of course. I hope you know that that's my mom.
Yes, yes.
And
You
and
did
so, of
well,
course,
Candy.
yeah, she did. She really did. Her and my dad, they're two amazing people, and I'm glad to represent both of them. But then this is easier. I looked at a post in my memories from 2012, and we were actually at the station recording It's a Woman's World. I had tagged all of you and Nadia and Michael and my mom. We were all at the station at It's a Woman's World. So we have been doing this now for about 11 to 12, 13 years. So I have been
Actually,
cultivated.
14, I think.
Wow.
We came in later, but I think it started 14 or 15 years ago.
Yeah. And so I've been
Wow.
cultivated by all these beautiful women. And one of the things that my mom always says is that behind every good woman is the women who came before her.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so, it's very true that to be a good woman, you've got to be around good women. They'll teach you how to talk, they'll correct you, and so that's what I appreciate. And then I met great folks like Barbara, okay, who is now my Facebook friend. I get to see all of her travels and all of her great pictures that she posts all the time. And then of course Nadia. So I've had the honor to be, here doing this. And it's one of the things that I absolutely love. So thank you, Laura. I mean, so I'm excited to be a part of this and now to take it to a new level and to a different. I've got a lot of different great ideas, and I know
Nice.
so many people, so many powerful women that are doing such impactful, great things. And so the conversations are going to continue, and they're going to elevate and be it's just really good. I'm looking forward to it, actually. So
I
thank
am
you,
too.
Nadia.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
Yeah.